of the Rockville Chamber of Commerce, and welcome.
Thank you. Marilyn?
Hi, good morning. Marilyn Balcom, Gaithersburg-Germantown Chamber of Commerce, and so glad to have you and see everybody's face this morning.
Janann?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janann Italiano, President and CEO of the Greater Bethesda Chamber, and look forward to hearing everybody's comments and questions and seeing the program.
Thank you. And Gigi?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank my colleagues and thank Tina and Jerome for spending their morning with us. And thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm looking forward to a very good discussion. Thank you.
And with us this morning are Jerome Fletcher, who is Assistant Chief Administrative Officer for the County Executive, and Tina Benjamin, a Special Assistant to the County Executive. So what I'll ask Courtney to do, Courtney from my staff is here running tech on the back end. So I will ask Courtney to release the results of the poll. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take it. So go ahead, Courtney.
Okay, that's interesting. It's pretty much split between fully open and partially open.
Great.
That is good.
Great.
That'll help.
Okay, so with that, I will turn the program over to Jerome. And I think what we'd like you to do, Jerome, is kind of go through a little overview of phase 2. We do have everyone muted, and we've had your videos turned off just to keep a little bit of distraction away from the cameras here, because we have so many faces with us. And we'll ask Jerome to go through it. And please put your questions in the chat. We'll answer some questions later. And Jerome, take it away.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm still looking at the poll results, and I think it's very interesting. You know, our goal, of course, we would love to have more in that fully open percentage, but, you know, we understand and we do recognize that, you know, the county and its phases of reopening are helping increase that number, while those are teleworking are still sort of easing their way back into that workforce that they did before. So we are happy today, you know, we're excited today. We believe that, you know, over the past 2 weeks and several days since we began phase 1, we've had a positive response. We know that businesses are opening and ambassadors are out in our community, and they're trying to be helpful, and they're trying to make sure that we answer questions and we provide information that businesses provide, feel is valuable throughout the community. We believe that phase 2 will take us that much closer. There's a lot of good things happening in phase 2. Jane, I'm not sure if you have the ability to go to our Reopening Montgomery website to maybe share a screen with those who are watching, just as we walk through some of the different phases, different industries, and different pieces of information.
If you give me a moment, I will try to make that happen.
I'll keep yapping, you go right ahead. So when we talk about phase 2, what we are doing is we're continuing to relax some of our restrictions. Mainly, the first thing that comes to mind is allowing for retail to occur. And for retail to occur, you know, you need to ensure that you are still following the 7 guidelines that the county puts out as requirements. Jane, if you drop down to the middle of this page real quick, where the business requirements are at, right there. So those business reopening requirements are still applicable to the first phase, this phase, and every phase. These are the requirements that keep us safe, to keep us, when we answer the question of, well, when are you going from phase 2 to phase 3? The better we are at doing these requirements, making sure that we practice social distancing, wearing our masks 2 and above, employees washing their hands, cleaning high contact surfaces, using materials that are CDC regulated, as well as making sure, to me, one of the most important things is making sure that we stay up to date with what the information is. You know, as our public health official is using data and science to guide our decision making, things will change, rules will evolve. Make sure you stay tuned in and plugged in to this website, our podcast, these sorts of meetings that we're on right now. These are areas that will help give you information so that you can act accordingly. So Jane, if you go back up now a little bit, we'll talk about a few of what's happening in phase 2. Car washes are now open with more requirements. Childcare is a big one. I'm not going to touch on them all, but I want to touch on childcare especially, because now that our workforce is returning, we need to ensure that childcare is there to provide for them. And so our childcare providers are open, not just for the dependents of those essential workers, which I think it was in the last phase. We also want you to know that we understand that there are childcare facilities within MCPS, and we're working with them to figure out how can we get those services provided, even though MCPS is closed at this time. Concerts and theaters remain closed, and I would like to point out that, you know, this industry has been hit, especially hospitality and recreation. Culture has been hit particularly hard. They were hit first and very hard, in my opinion. And we are trying to work with our leadership to figure out ways on how to get them closer to opening, which is in phase 3. I do want to point out and remind everyone, if you didn't know or you don't recognize, we are lagging behind the state in where they are in their phase 2, and we're trying to see, you know, sync up with where we're at and where they're at, and figure out where the gaps are. But we can't get out in front of the governor. You know, we can go up to what the governor has allowed, but we can't get out and open something that he has not deemed open yet at this time. Gyms, hospitals, hotels, I will say houses of worship are being allowed, and houses of worship are, you know, a tricky category, especially when they're using a situation or I should say a facility that is owned by another area, and they can't open. For instance, theaters. There's a theater that may rent out their space for a house of worship for their religious services, and religious services are allowed as an activity right now, but theaters are not. So it can get kind of tricky in there. And as I can imagine, as the questions this group may have, Tina and I have done a lot of answering of questions this week, that those situations, as they arise, we're trying to get the best information possible to guide our community. Jane, can you go up a little bit? No, I'm sorry, down. You can go down. Yeah.
The other up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the other way. You know, indoor gatherings and outdoor gatherings. You know, the rule on retail and indoor gathering is there's less than 50 people. You can only have up to 50 people. 50 is our number, as well as one person per every 200 square feet. The reason why we have that one person per 200 square feet is that is based on the amount of people that can safely occupy a certain space and do it safely, in the cause which we have of making sure that everyone stays safe during the spread of an infectious disease. The capacity numbers that people traditionally associate with businesses are for an egress of how fast can you get a safe number of people out in the case of a disaster or an emergency. So there's the difference between those two right there. And the reason why restaurants are different is because restaurants' capacities vary based on their table sizes. So they'll have to space out their table sizes in different ways to make sure that they keep people socially distanced by 6 feet being apart. So once again, that can get kind of tricky as well. When you go down to the very bottom, and I'm going to stop talking here right now, Jane, because I know there's probably a lot of questions that people want to get to. When you get down to the very bottom of the page, there's a flyer in the bottom left that says Phase 2 opening requirements right there. Stop there. Whoa, 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 whoa. One more. There you go. Right there to your left. That right there, you can click on it. You can download it. It's a quick sheet that kind of helps answer a lot of questions that we get on a regular basis. We're trying to distribute that as much as possible, and we're also open for questions that people have, you know, arbitrarily through our COVID-19, our biz info. Oh my gosh, biz info COVID-19. I'll get the website for you. It's not on the top of my head right now. We'll get that to you in the chat before we leave to make sure that if you have any more questions that we don't answer today, that we can get them to you as soon as possible. I'll stop right there. Tina, I can't believe I blanked on the email address right now, but BizInfo COVID-19.
Yes, so B-I-Z info COVID-19 at Montgomery County MD.gov. We have folks that are manning that email box, and a group professionals are meeting every day to discuss the questions that are coming in. And if I could just add one thing, please. I think that sometimes establishments have multi-purposes, right? So let's just take Strathmore, for example. It's a concert hall. They have food service. They do tea. They have a gallery. The advice given to us, and it really kind of opened up my eyes a little bit, was to always think about these things in terms of the activity that's taking place, and look at that activity and the guidelines to follow that activity versus just looking at the structure of the building. And I think when you think about it that way, you're like, oh, I get it now. So just a little helpful tidbit there.
Okay, so are you guys ready to take some questions?
Bring it
We have
on.
several. Okay. The first question I see is, we are an essential business that was able to stay open, but we have the majority of our employees still working remotely. As an office, we can't find a lot of specific guidelines for requirements or best practices for bringing people back into the office, as working remotely has presented some challenges for us. I've gotten this question several times, so I would love to hear some comments on where we can find those in the office recommendations.
So is that in relation to in the office, the space itself as to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So on our website, we also have information regarding office buildings. It's on our business resource page, the page that you were on in the right side. There is.
Hold on, let me do that again.
So if you look under reopening resources, Jane, to the right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then it says office space guidance.
Am I on the right page?
You are. Go down. You got to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. There. Keep going. Resources over to your right. See that? No.
There you go.
Actually, you could have gotten there that way. I take that back.
Okay.
But don't go there.
Okay.
Yeah. Right there. Office space guidance.
New.
There you go.
Okay.
And it talks about information regarding, how to handle, we're talking about common areas, elevators, meeting rooms, lobbies. All of this stuff on here is information for those who are trying to return to the business world in the best way possible.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat if I can. Okay, I need to stop the share in order to do that. Here we go. Okay, the next question we have is, how do we acquire the next necessary CDC certified training for our employees prior to reopening?
I don't believe there's a necessary CDC training required. I think there are CDC guidelines that we encourage, as well as, CDC, of course, in order to be the safest and to allow for the least spread of this virus as possible. I have not heard this required anywhere. The only requirements I'm aware of are the ones that we, as Montgomery County, require businesses to acknowledge and post that they will be in compliance with. And of course, that still follows the reinforcement of the CDC guidelines, but I don't think that CDC requires them, if I'm answering that question correctly.
Okay. If not a retail, restaurant, etc. business, a standard office environment, must our staff wash hands every hour and wear a mask in private offices?
I'm under the impression that every employee needs to wash their hands every hour, but Tina, correct me if I'm wrong on that one or how you feel about that one, but now that we are expanding the guidelines to more of retail and more of our office staff, I still think that their intention is to make sure that we stay as clean and safe as possible. But Tina, do you know something else on that one?
No, I would just encourage people to take as many precautions in your office as necessary. I mean,
right.
But to follow up, if you have your own office, are you supposed to be wearing a mask in that office all the time? If you're within your own four walls, you don't need to wear a mask, right?
If you were in your own four walls, in your own office, I would think that you would be okay not wearing a mask.
as long as your office is enclosed and not partitioned off.
Right.
When you move into the partitioned offices, that presents a different issue.
because there's more airflow that is not controlled within a particular office, four walls and a door kind of space.
It might be helpful if you guys do look at some guidelines, because I know some folks who work for the federal government, and they have some standards in terms of what they do. If they're in their own private offices, they do not wear a mask. If someone comes in, they put on a mask. If they're spending 3 or 4 hours working on a project, sitting in their own offices, they're not washing their hands every hour. So it might be helpful to look at whatever the federal government has, and maybe see whether we can provide the office space, small offices, some guidance.
Now, I would imagine that the federal government got those guidelines from the CDC.
Probably.
Because, right.
Probably.
So what we're saying is follow the CDC guidelines. And we're not going to be able to know every example of everything. But, I think that as we dig deeper and the more questions like this arise, and you've just educated me, and I believe Tina as well, as to what we didn't know, it's all about the information sharing. It's all about making sure, and please don't anyone pretend or think that the county knows it all or we have all the answers. We certainly do not, but we do recognize, like what you just said in this example with the federal government, that they probably recognize the CDC guidelines are very comprehensive and deep, and we all should just make sure we pay as much attention to them as possible.
Okay, we are a business fully reopened and finding challenges getting PPE for our businesses. We would like to know if the county will be providing businesses with PPE, or at least assisting businesses with getting them. The county dropped off 1 bucket of hand sanitizer over 2 months ago.
So the county has a website, and Tina, is it MoCo PPE?
I'll have to check.
Yeah, we can look it up real quick, but there's a county website, MoCo, I think it's PPE. And what we did there was we actually don't own or control the products that are being provided to the public. But what we did was allow the public to leverage our buying power to get the same rates that we do when we purchase. These are yes, Marilyn.
So Jerome, yeah, that I ordered from them as soon as that site went live, and I've yet to receive it. And that was how long ago was that? A month ago, 6 weeks ago?
Is there a reason they said why you didn't receive it? They out of stock, or?
So I asked for gloves and masks, and they said the gloves they don't have any, and the masks would be coming, but I haven't received it. So I have talked to Ash about it. So we're not sending people there. We're sending people to chamber members. And I think we all have a list of who those people are.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to give all my colleagues a chance to do a shout out, because we have a place on our website of all of our members who have pivoted to selling PPE and various other reopening resources. And I know all my colleagues have the same thing. So I would encourage everybody on here to go to your members, go to our websites and look for it, because our members at least are trying to offer them at relatively competitive prices compared to what you saw earlier on.
Okay. That sounds like a plan too. Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, okay, wait, why is office opening only at 25% occupancy and not 50%? Where did the 1 person per 113 square feet office occupancy come from? And how do we get to phase 3? And what are the specific matrices in phase 3?
Metrics?
A lot there.
There was a lot there. So
let's start with, why is the office opening at 25 occupancy and not 50% occupancy?
So the reason why it's opening at 25% and not 50 is because this is the first time office buildings have been opened. So it is an easy opening to get there. The easier we can get to 50%, the better we can control any situation. 50%, of course, is half, and that's a large number or volume of what could be in an office space. So without hearing it directly from our public health official, I can pretty much tell you that's where the 25% came to the 50%. The next question was about the 113.
Was 1 person per 113. I think that means 100 square feet of, or maybe it's 113 office occupancy. Maybe that's different.
Right. I believe that is a number that our public health official was comfortable with based on the size that we know of office spaces. The reason why it's lower than the one person per 200 square feet that is associated with other businesses such as retail is because you have desks and all sorts of cubicles and other equipment that will make it tough to have 1 person for every 200 square feet. So he reduced it to a level that was more conducive to still reduce the spread, but allow more people in the area.
Okay. And how do we get to phase 3, and what are the specific matrices to get to phase 3?
So phase 3, we get to, again, by adhering to the rules of phase 2. Our leadership is still monitoring the same metrics that are on our dashboard, including the number of new cases. Our positivity rate continues to be low. Our testing numbers continue to rise. So that's a good combination. For phase 2 to phase 3, as far as I'm aware, there are no new metrics that will be used. We are still monitoring the same ones and just making sure that everyone keeps adhering to those so that we keep our numbers low for cause of spread of the disease, as well as keeping our numbers low of new cases.
Okay. The governor's plan, unless I'm mistaken, is set for 50% of the fire code capacity. Is it possible that meetings and events could be allowed to do the same? I'm in a hotel.
Hotels are subject to the 50 people or less rule for a gathering. I'm not sure, Tina, do you know? I'm not sure if they're subject to the 50% capacity rule.
Well, this is where I think a hotel needs to look at the various aspects. Again, it's an indoor gathering capped at 50 people. But if you can show that there is not an intermingling of activities, like a certain amount in a restaurant and then a certain amount of folks in a meeting room, and they are not interacting, they have separate bathrooms, you can segregate the coming and going, then that would be permitted. But the specific activities within a facility are capped at 50, like per activity.
And I think the main point of what she just said there was separating the coming and going, because you can't say, well, we're going to invite 100 people and just separate them into 2 rooms at the same time. I don't think that would violate the intent or the spirit of what we're trying to do. They would truly need to be kept separate in order to do that in that space.
Okay.
If you let me ask, if you have a ballroom setting that normally fits 400 people or 600 people, then what are you
Yep.
saying? 50% of that, or are you saying just 50 people, an entire ballroom that fits all those people?
Correct.
We're saying 50 people.
That's a killer.
Right. Right now, there are no large gatherings over 50 people allowed. So even if it were 50%, it is a maximum up to 50 people. That is how it is. That is how it is written in our regulation. For instance, if you were at a restaurant and your capacity was 200, and we say, which we do, is a 50% capacity, but you say, okay, well, I can let 100 people in. Well, you can't, because it's 50% or 50 people, whichever one is lower. It's not whichever one's greater.
Jerome, I have a question back to this percentage issue. And I don't know if you've covered this, I didn't think so, but when we just say a percentage, I opened up the requirements thing just to reread it, and it doesn't say or a number. So for example, if you have a shop with, if you have a small company or a retail operation or anything else, it isn't so much about 25%. Like if there are only 4 of you, that means 25% would be 1 person, right? I mean, are you doing or a minimum number? I was just looking to see what's the other side. It's like, usually you don't just do a percentage of something. I'm just curious because it doesn't work for a small group to just say that.
No. So, and that's a good question. So the 50% capacity is, of course, whatever the capacity is of the particular location that we're talking about. But there's also an indoor and an outdoor gathering limit of up to 50 people. So what our rules say is you can do the 50% capacity as long as you're not exceeding 50 people. If you get to the number 50 people, it doesn't matter about capacity or anything else. That is our number. Anything larger than that would constitute a large gathering. And that is something that is in a subsequent phase.
Okay, that's for a large gathering. But in an office, inside an office suite.
Suite, right.
There's still the 25% or not?
Where'd you get 25%?
I was looking at this requirements thing. Guidance or requirements for office space utilization. I'm just looking at this, where it says 25%.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. When I was using 50%, first of all, I thought that was in our example, and I was thinking more of restaurant is the only place outside of office building now that we use capacity numbers. So let me stop there. That's the only other place. Retail is all per square foot. So now we're talking about office space capacity, 25%. And your question is, in an office space, are you allowed to exceed 50 people if that's 25% of your occupancy space? Is that the question?
No, it just said 25%. So I thought, well, if you've got a staff of 12 people and you can only have 25% in, why is, is that, are you achieving the goal that you're trying to achieve? That's all. I mean, we're just looking at office space utilization. I think people think they can bring everybody back, or half of them or something.
Okay, I'm gonna try one more time, and then I might have to punt to Tina. But let me try one more time. So you have an office space that can hold 30 people. You have a staffing of 12 people. So 25% of your 30 should be, quick math, is that
7.
less than your 12 staff that you have, per Tina. So you would only be able to bring back 7 of your staff of the 12 in that example.
So it's not actually 25% of my staff. It's 25% of the staff I could have in a space of this size.
Correct. There should be an occupancy or a certificate that tells you how many people can fit in a certain space within your office. It's not based on the number of staff you actually have hired.
I just know for me that would be I don't even know what that would be, because of my square footage, 2 conference rooms, like never mind. Sorry, I asked, but I just think there are a lot of office, in my building, 51 Monroe, we got, 19 floors of offices, accounting firms, law firms, IT, all kinds of cyber companies,
And to your,
let's try to get some more guidance on that, or get it more specific, because I have 28 more questions left in the queue here. So
okay,
thank you, Jerome.
Wait, one more thing before I let you go, Gigi. So are you saying that for your floor in your building, there's nothing that tells you what your occupancy is for your particular floor? Is that a true statement? Yeah, to your knowledge. I don't know. To your knowledge, right.
Okay, we're gonna switch gears now.
We're in trouble.
Any further recommendations on masks in gyms? Some people are very concerned about being able to breathe effectively.
About masks in gyms?
Wearing masks when you're in the gym.
It's my understanding that masks in health clubs are required.
Okay. Any resources being provided to businesses to help them comply, and how are complaints being handled?
Any resources to businesses? So we have resources to businesses on the website that we list for all of our guidance that we provide to our businesses, as well as complaints are being handled through our ambassador program. We are listening to requests and complaints through them and 311, and then we're addressing that through our ambassadors in the field. Tina, is that right?
Okay.
Yes.
The fact that it's required is on the document that we have to, okay. Are businesses encouraged to continue having staff work remotely in phase 2 as long as remote working works?
Yes.
Okay. Follow-up question from yesterday. Realize that concerts, theaters, libraries, and recreation facilities cannot open until the governor lifts phase 3 restrictions. Wondering if we have any idea what the governor's criteria is going to be.
Not at this time. From me, Tina, I'm not sure how you
No, what we've seen from the state is what you all see. You get notice of a press conference, and then that's when we all seem to find out.
Okay. The question is about whether the recording will be available after to everybody. Okay. I believe the CDC states the 6-foot distances longer than 15 minutes for an exposure.
Is that a question or a statement?
I'm not really sure.
Is there a question mark at the end of it?
see, I believe CDC states the 6-foot distance restriction, is for longer than 15 minutes of an exposure. So they're talking about if people are passing each other. I think the question relates to if somebody pops into my office and there's only 4 feet between me and the person there, you know, are they allowed to come into my office? And I'd wear a mask.
I understand what the CDC says, but as far as I would recommend everyone to stay 6 feet away from each other as often as possible. You need to be as safe as possible.
Okay. What are the guidelines for youth sports? At what point are organized games with limited attendance going to be allowed?
So the guidelines for youth sports are listed on our regulation page, which let me go back. I'm not sure if it's on our specific reopening page, but our youth sport essentially links back to the state of Maryland where they are allowing youth sports to happen. And we just recently had a conversation about it being capped at 15, and that cap was changed because it's no longer there in the youth sports guidance on Maryland's page.
On your page, when it says open with requirements,
Yes.
Where did they find those requirements?
So the requirements are, go ahead, Tina.
No, I was going to say they're right below the chart, Janan. So if you look at the chart, it says business reopening requirements. We typically refer to them as the big 6. So it is.
And where
I'm going to them now.
And where it says download the requirements, that's what everybody needs to have posted or shown that they've gone over with their employees, correct?
Thank you. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the basic safety and awareness issues, masks, washing hands, understanding the guidelines, things like that, disinfecting high touch areas. I mean, it's your basic guidelines for all establishments.
Correct.
And I do want to reiterate what Janan said. The business is required to post these, correct?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Going back just to look for, okay. There's still a lot of questions about how many people are advised in an office building. So multi-tenant office buildings, if a tenant in a multi-building is 50 people are in our office or the entire building. There's a lot of these questions. So I think that maybe perhaps we can get some specific guidance on that. The morning guidelines say limits occupancy in a communal or shared spaces, including conference room lobbies or break rooms or other shared spaces to no more than 1 person for 113 square feet.
Yeah, and this issue came up in the small group task force. I think that Jerome and Tina, if we could just get some clearer guidance, and we can help get it out to our members.
Okay. And we now another question. Many small businesses have been visited by the county inspectors. I think you're calling them ambassadors already after just reopening. These are the same inspectors that normally write them up for violations. When the inspectors come back, will they write up the businesses for a violation, and how much is the fine or fines? Businesses are scared of the county and many are thinking of leaving.
So I think the question was, will these be the same people who come back and write them up for a violation? I'm assuming that if a violation exists, that's the question. If a violation exists, then they're going to do that role when they come back in order to make sure that compliance is adhered to. But no one's going to write someone up if let me rephrase that. No one should be writing someone up if a violation is not there. And what we're working on is with our person who is the lead over these particular staff members is ensuring that we develop more training so that they are given softer and more people-friendly ways to deal with our public. Because we have heard this complaint before from someone very close to us, and we're trying to make sure that we do make sure that it gets resolved.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about liability. Some states, and I don't know whether this is a state question or whether this is county question, but I think we should get your comments on it. Some states are looking at placing the liability of employers if an employee comes down with COVID. And has anyone heard about this, whether the county or our state is considering giving businesses a little bit of protection should someone in their office or a customer come down with COVID?
Yeah, so it is a state initiative, and that's where there have been a few states that have enacted that kind of legislation. It's really not at a local level. And I have heard of a few businesses that have been lobbying for a similar state of Maryland law.
And I'll add to that just by saying, if you're a business owner and you're bringing employees back, protect yourself by following the requirements that the county is asking you to do. Those requirements are our best ways of telling you how to be the safest at this time. So therefore, if something happens in the future and you have to contact your insurance person or whoever, you'll be able to say, these are the guidelines that I was asked to follow for safety. I have documentation that I actually followed these guidelines. I mean, I don't, other than doing that and not letting employees back to work, I don't know if there's anything else at this time that's available.
Okay. As a tenant in a shared office building, what are the expectations are there on the building management to ensure that common areas, lobbies, bathrooms, and elevators are properly cleaned and following all of the requirements?
That is in the office guidance that we just looked over, as well as what is required for the business to open. So the onus is on the landlord to make sure those areas stay clean and safe.
Okay. Well, we are at 11:14. We are supposed to end this at 11:15. I think I've gone through most of the questions. There were some repeats, so if I didn't get your exact question, I apologize. We will be providing as a follow-up, there'll be a link to this video. I'm going to provide it to all of my chamber colleagues, so it'll be on their YouTube pages and available. We'll also send everyone who registered for the meeting a link to the video, which will include some information from the chat, and we will also include contact information for both Tina and Jerome. So what I'd like to do is oh, Marilyn, you got a question?
I just have an announcement. So the SBA has reopened the EIDL application. So if you did not apply for the EIDL loan, there's an advance, which is a grant. That's $1,000 per employee. That's a grant. And then the EIDL loan is a loan. So they just reopened that this week if you're interested in applying for that loan grant.
I'd like to add something to what Marilyn and Jane and Margie and Janan and I have all asked all of you to do, which is, as you are navigating through this, when we hear your problems and your issues, it informs the advocacy that all of us do on all of your behalf. So we want to know what's not working, right?
Yep.
I mean, we need it, and that's at the federal level and the state and the county level. We're not going to be done with this. I think there are going to be it's going to be a lot of recovery issues, and I think this is going to go on a while. So we need to hear from you. Thanks.
And
I'll add to what Marilyn said. There is, and Janan, I'll let you come in right a minute. There's also money still left for PPP loans if anybody wants them. There's still money available in that pot. And now that they've changed the rules in terms of allowing you a longer time to spend it and changing the percentages of what you have to spend on payroll, that money is still available for members. So I know all of us can answer questions. I'll go to Janan and then I'm going to go to Margie.
The other part that we want to know is the best practices, what people have found that have worked for them as well. So if there's any information that you would like to share, that the best way of opening up your place. Again, we've got another phase to go. After phase 2, we'll be doing this again for phase 3, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But not only just what isn't working, but also what is working, so that we can share those best practices too.
Great. Margie?
And just because phase 2 is opening at 5 o'clock tonight doesn't mean everything's going to be open at 5 o'clock tonight. I don't know if Jerome, you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We have heard from various business owners or certain industries that say, just because you're allowing us to open at 5, we're not ready. And that is their prerogative. And I would caution anyone who is not ready to open in the safest way possible, or have outstanding questions where there is a sense of high concern not to open. Get the answers to your questions. Reach out not only to us, but whether it's the other resources. The state has information, there's a lot of information out there. And so if you have any sense of concern, please make sure that you don't open until you're ready, and also be mindful that others won't open until they're ready as well.
Okay. And I know, Tina, you wanted to make a closing remark, a closing request.
Thank you. I did. Thanks, Jane. So, the county is excited about this next reopening phase. We continue to look for ways to assist our business community with whatever issues you're dealing with. So please, if you have ideas for us, be it big, medium, small, policy, financial, whatever it is, please drop Jerome or I an email, and we'll consider these ideas. Thank you.
Okay. And again, like I said, we're going to be sending a copy of the link to the video of the recording out to everyone, and we'll get Jerome and Tina's emails within that message that we follow up. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to continuing to reopen the economy here in Montgomery County and in all of our local communities. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for hosting as well. Rockville, Gaithersburg-Germantown, Bethesda, and the Montgomery County Chamber, and us, of course, the Silver Spring Chamber. So thank you all, and have a great day.
See you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Stay healthy.
Thank you much.